All right, everybody, Dr. Yang here again. And so I am going to give you some really high overarching strategies for what qualitative analysis actually means. So when we talk about qualitative data, really what we're talking about is stories. So this is like a Word document with thousands and thousands and thousands of words. If you've ever seen a transcript where it'll say something like researcher, blah, 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 participant, blah, 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 that's really what we're looking at here. And these are very big files. You know, an hour of discussion, an hour of narrative can be like really, really, really long. I mean, we're talking 20 pages or more. And then the process of transcribing that takes a really long time. Now, there are technologies that help us now, so that's great, but they're not perfect. There is a cost associated. So really what we're looking at here is we're taking an audio file and turning it into a text so that we can analyze this text. There are programs that help us to analyze this data, but at the end of the day, it's really all going to be the same thing. So you got to make a choice about like what funding you have available and what resources you have at your disposal. So getting all of this set up is the first step. So you're taking your audio, you're turning it into files, you're purchasing a program, you're doing whatever you need to do so that when it comes time to sit down and analyze the data, you have everything in its proper place. So then you're going to actually begin to analyze your data. Now, this is going to vary tremendously based on the approach that you use. There are very prescriptive steps for the ethnography, for the grounded theory, for phenomenological. So we're not going to get into the nuances of that, but you have to understand that this is a systematic process. This is not just like, meh, this is what I think happened. There is a process here, there is a protocol, and you have to be very careful to find those steps. We're not worried about the outliers. If you interviewed 30 folks and 28 of the people gave you a similar story and 2 people did not, that's okay. We're not excluding them from this particular type of analysis. And this step is very time intensive. You know, it can take months and months to analyze good qualitative data. For example, you know, I keep referencing my dissertation, but it was the largest single research study that I have done to date with qualitative data. And this study, I had roughly 30 participants, and each of them did between a 1 and 2 hour interview. And this was back in 2016. I'm still analyzing data. So there's a huge amount of data available. Often you can ask multiple questions of your data and go back and reanalyze and have a deeper understanding of what you've got. But what's important here is that you understand the steps of the process for the method that you are using and that you adhere to them. Qualitative does not mean sloppy. Qualitative does not mean that there's no intentionality. There is absolutely intentionality, and you have to really adhere to those steps with fidelity to ensure the rigor of your data. Typically what happens is there is a first read through of your entire collection of data, and then you're sort of separating out the chunks that are important. And sometimes that's just like filler information, chit chat at the beginning, chit chat at the end, things that aren't relevant to your question. And as you start reading it, you are going to start noticing themes. You're going to notice things that come up. You're going to notice things that are talked about in all of the interviews. And you can kind of start taking those themes and putting them into categories. And once you know that, you can start to identify your specific codes. And codes are like little words or taglines that help you put a really small little blurb onto whatever it is you're reading. So maybe you're reading a 12-line story from your participants, but you are able to put a single code on that story of hope or hopeless or future-oriented, right? So you are able to sort of summarize large swaths of your text with a single word. And then you are able to make meaning of what you've read by organizing those codes. So here's, for those who need a visual, here's the sort of the process that we have. So we have our raw data, which are the files, everything that's in the file. So we read them, we cut out the fluff, and then we start to notice themes or patterns. Maybe, thinking of my dissertation, some of the early themes were support people. Lots of people were talking about folks who were supportive to them, that were influential in making meaning for their lives, helping them to survive that period of emergence from foster care would not have been possible without the help of certain helping people. So then I can break down those helping people into categories. Are they related to family? Are they related to like institutions, social workers, things like that? Are they teachers? Are they friends? Are they coworkers? And so I can sort of break that down into categories, and then from there I can make codes. So maybe I have one that's like educator helpful, educator unhelpful, high school, college, and sort of grabbing at all of the different ways that educators manifest to get back to those patterns of helping people. There's a lot of different ways that you can code. There's a lot of different ways to manage this process. There are programs like Deduce, which are incredibly helpful. There's also In Vivo and Atlas TI. You can even do it on paper, right? You can literally do this color-coded. You can do it in Word, which is how I did my dissertation, highlighting things and putting a particular code on them. What's going to be important is that you keep a list of your codes and make a code book, where you say, okay, when I use the code HOPE, this is what I mean. When I'm using the code supportive, this is what I mean. And it's okay that you go back and redo it, right? So maybe you start reading interviews and you think you've got all of your codes, and then you come across an interview and they introduce a new topic that you hadn't thought about before. That's okay. You just go back and look at the interviews that you'd already finished to see if you need to add new categories or new themes. And then once you've got all of your coding done, you sort of pull all of those codes into a new document or into a new space to organize and make meaning of them from there. So now you're starting to develop a story. You look at all of these codes that you've got related to HOPE. So you don't just want to restate what they shared. You want to start making meaning of this. You want to start to develop some ideas, some theories, some hypotheses about what your participants shared. A visual might be helpful. Word clouds or wordles are excellent to sort of show the strength of different words that appear in this code or in this theme. And when you report it out, quotes are often used to highlight exceptional or novel ideas. You have to make sure that you have rigor in qualitative. Qualitative does not mean sloppy. So you can triangulate, where you take different data points to reach the same conclusion. But really, respondent validation or member checking is a really important method, and that's where you sort of take your findings and present them to the participants and ask for their review, their buy-in, to see if they agree with what you have proposed here. You can also engage in reflexivity, which is thought about you and how who you are has allowed you to reach the findings that you have. Now, when we report these out, we're going to present them in the same sort of style. You're going to have an introduction, you're going to have a lit review, you're going to have a method section that you would in a quantitative paper. But rather than having tables and charts that outline the statistical significance and they give a whole bunch of numbers, instead we're going to tell a story, and that story is going to be highlighted by participant quotes to really drive home what we are sharing. Now, APA says that we do need to identify unique participants, but we don't want to violate their identity. We really want to say something like participant 7, male, age 49, or whatever, so that we're not giving their names and we're not giving any information that would identify them. And then we want to talk about how present this finding was in our study. So we're not looking to generalize, but we're just looking to say, like, Of the 30 participants in this study, 17 echoed this sentiment, so that we give them a sort of a sense of how impactful or how present this theme was in our data. When we talk about qualitative research, this is a type of research that really allows us to dive in and make meaning from stories. We are part of the story. We bring ourselves, we bring our theoretical lens, we bring our lived experience, but we also intentionally select theoretical perspectives, interpretive guidelines to our data so that we are able to holistically take those stories and generate meaning, generate finding from this data. So hopefully this sort of gave you a sense of how we go from an audio file to a report when we're talking about qualitative data. But like I said, this is in a lot of ways harder than quantitative research because it's not as prescriptive and there's a lot more decision points that you as the researcher have to make. So if you still have questions or concerns, you are more than welcome to let me know and I will be happy to chat with you about this. Hopefully this was helpful. Take care, everybody.